of His Eminence Archbishop Makarios to welcome you all to this inaugural Pastoral Health Care Network Australia seminar, and to thank the organisers who have worked very hard to bring this to fruition. And I, along with yourselves, are waiting with anticipation to hear the speakers, to learn, and to be inspired. So I will stop here. God bless you all.
Your Grace, Bishop Iacobos of Meridoupolis, Reverend Fathers, Presbyteros, and dear friends, it is with a lot of excitement that we welcome you here today for the inaugural seminar of the Greek Orthodox Pastoral Health Care Network Australia. As a way of introduction, I'd like to give you a little historical background as to how we have arrived here today. It was about 20 years ago where this effort commenced with a priest in Greece, Very Reverend Father Stavros Kofinas, proto-presbyter of the Ecumenical Throne. Father Stavros is a very important person to know about in relation to the Pastoral Health Care Network. He is a Greek American, born in America from Greek parents. He is a priest and a psychologist and psychotherapist who, after settling in his career in America, then moved to Greece about 20 or 30 years ago and has been working in Greece and ministering in Greece as both a priest and a psychologist, psychotherapist. And it was his vision, seeing that people that work in pastoral roles, priests, doctors, psychologists, and everyone else working in the health sector and as chaplains and priests, that there was a need for them to be supported, to come together, to learn from each other. And in 2008, he, under the auspices of the Ecumenical Patriarchate and the full blessing of His Holiness, Patriarch Bartholomew, he commenced the first conference of the Pastoral Health Care Network of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. It was in Rhodes, in Greece, and the 5 conferences that have happened have been at the same place. The Metropolitan there, Bishop Kyrillos, heads the effort of the Pastoral Health Care Network of the Patriarchate together with Father Kofinas. Australian representation commenced in 2014 at the 3rd conference. The first one in 2008, the second in 2011, and the third in 2014. And it was His late Eminence Archbishop Stylianos that asked my lowly self to represent the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Australia at the conference in 2014. And I agreed, and I found it very fascinating and very enriching and very inspiring. One of the main purposes of those conferences every 3 years is to extend the networks. So not just the representatives at the conferences, but that each representative, they represented each of the archdioceses and the metropolises of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and also invitations extended to every metropolis in Greece and in Cyprus. All those representatives were invited and encouraged to go back to their metropolises and archdioceses and to extend the networks at each of those metropolises or archdioceses. The next conference was in 2017. We had a newborn child at home, and I declined the invitation to go to that conference. And it was Father Dimitri, our first speaker for today, who attended that conference. The 2021 was delayed, and it was His Eminence Archbishop Makarios that invited me to attend the conference which was to be held in 2022. And my response to him was, I'd love to, I'd be honoured, but I don't think I can do it on my own. We need another delegate. And me saying that was that given the rest of my responsibilities, I felt that I couldn't on my own come back and fulfill one of the aims of the conference, which was to extend the network. So His Eminence Archbishop Makarios, in full support, says that you have a second delegate. And after prayer and much thought, we chose Presbytera Katerina Konstantinidis, and the two of us are now the national coordinators of the Greek Orthodox Pastoral Health Care Network in Australia. Most of you will be familiar with Presbytera Katerina. Stand up, Presbytera. As a vague introduction to myself, I'm the parish priest at St Nectarios Burwood, and also a child and adolescent psychiatrist in private practice. And Presbytera Katerina is a social worker with decades of experience in different fields within social work, including drug and alcohol, a lot of research done about the needs of the presbyteros and the priests in their ministry. Since coming back from the conference in October 2022, we have been working, thinking about what it would look like to set up the network here in Australia. The greatest barrier we have is that of distance and covering the whole continent. We presented a proposed structure, at the Clergy Lady Conference in October last year, with the full support of His Eminence Archbishop Makarios. And what we found at the Clergy Lady Conference was overwhelming support to continue this work. So we have continued to try and work behind the scenes to try and set this up. And one of the first things that was done was in October last year, immediately after the conference, was the feast day of the Synaxis of the Doctor Saints. The Synaxis of the Doctor Saints was an idea that Father Stavros Kofinas presented, or rather proposed, to the Holy Synod, which accepted that feast day and is celebrated around the 18th of October. The first time it was celebrated was at the Pastoral Health Care Conference in 2022, and last year was the first time that it could be celebrated outside of that conference. At St Nectarios Burwood, we had a Vesper service for the saints, and we know on the day of the feast, the Sunday around the 18th of October, Concord Church celebrated its feast and invited doctors and other healthcare professionals to that feast. And we know that in other places in Australia, Melbourne, Perth, that a similar thing had happened as well. So this is the next stage, the first ever seminar, and this is where we are today. We're starting in small steps, and admittedly I'm quite overwhelmed by the reaction, by the attendance of all of you today. It's the beginning. It's the beginning, and the sky's the limit as to where this effort can go. We know that there's lots of need in different parts of the church community and of the community at large. And the pastoral work is not easy. If the church can help to support those that work in the health sector in all sorts of pastoral areas, then that would be the scope and the aim of the Pastoral Health Care Network in Australia. So that's as a way of introduction. Today's seminar is on self-care, maintaining self-care in our ministry. We've used the quote from the book of Proverbs, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." The basic tenet that we can only serve others if we're able to look after ourselves. If we're not able to look after ourselves properly, then we're not able to minister to others as we ought. The first speaker for today is Very Reverend Father and Dr. Dimitrios Kokinos. Father Dimitri is Proto-Presbyter of the Ecumenical Throne, which is the highest title of honour that is bestowed to a married clergy priest. He is the parish priest of the parish and community of St. Ioannis Parramatta. He is also a consultant physician in neurology. He is a visiting medical officer and a conjoint lecturer at Bankstown Hospital, and also works as a neurologist in private practice.
Your Grace, your Reverend Fathers, Presbyteros, I'm very happy to see you all. Feeling a bit nervous. So many talented people here. I was wondering how to pitch this. I'm not sure if you'll agree with how I've pitched it. I just thought about it. I think we all know that those in the caring professions, maybe not sure, maybe I'm a bit too old. We used to call it when I was young, burnout. I don't even know if young people still use it. I think it means you've lost that enthusiasm, you're getting tired, you don't wake up in the morning, you've got to go to work, it's a drag, that sort of thing. Maybe a bit depressed, a bit whatever. And it's something, it's familiar, and I thought, what am I going to say about it to prevent it? I could have talked about make sure you have holidays and spend time with your family and make sure you're physically healthy. I'm glad there's a doctor going to speak and a social worker and so on. And I'm looking forward to the nutrition side of things. That should be interesting. The thing though that got to me is, once we go on a holiday, I'm not saying not to, but you can even go on a beautiful holiday, it's very expensive, but it's possible that that holiday will be a disaster because the people you're holidaying with, you argue and you lose your temper and there's screaming matches or it's good to spend time, but don't get me wrong, we shouldn't neglect, we all know this, people get very busy, they neglect their families and the families suffer and they suffer. But if one isn't virtuous, you can spend time with your family, but that time may be negative time. Again, there may be nevra, what's nevra in English? Irritability, annoyance. So unless one is virtuous, none of this really rests us. None of this gives us strength to keep going. And I've decided to pitch it this is my personal belief. I believe it with all my heart. When I see it, I feel I can feel it. The best way we can minister to people that we're called to minister to is if we are spiritually doing well. I'm a bit of a boring speaker and it may drift off as I'm talking, so I might just say the important things, the practical things, before I even start. What I really think helps us if we're growing in prayer, if we're reading, if we're enjoying the liturgy, we have a sacramental life, we go for confession, if we're reading the scriptures, spiritual books, this is food. If we're nurturing our faith, if our faith is growing, it's very, I should have made a slide out of this, but it's very, I think, topical that today's gospel reading was the famous reading, I'm sure we all know, but Jesus said, I was hungry and you gave me food, I was thirsty and you gave me drink, and they say, when did we see you hungry? And just because you did it one of the least of these, you did it to me. To me, one of the big messages of this gospel reading is we find Christ in the people we are ministering to. We find Christ in everybody. And then it's no longer boring. The reason I'm saying all this is my deep conviction, and the conviction of millions of people through the ages, that the ways of Christ work. The ways of the church work. They really do. Whoever believes on him, as Apostle Paul quoting Isaiah, will not be put to shame. Why? Because his teachings work. For example, learn from me, this is Christ, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. The church fathers and the scriptures emphasize humility. Humility, I don't know if everyone understands it. The opposite of humility is pride, where we feel entitled. You know, some of these things, no one cares about my feelings. I don't like people telling me what to do. If we can be humble, this is liberating. This prevents problems. And it works. If we just focused on our needs, this is not humility. Jesus also said, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself. A very famous passage. And take up his cross and follow me. The calling of Christ is one of self-denial. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. St. Paisius talked about the spiritual paradox. If we care about our needs, we will be less happy. If we have this spirit of self-sacrifice, of self-denial, we will find our lives. If we can have this is a lifelong journey for all of us, but if we can only have this spirit of Christ, the spirit of self-denial, then we won't burn out, because we will enjoy serving, because this is our calling. St. John of Kronstadt, I'm very fond of him. The best moments on earth, he doesn't say going on a holiday to the Greek islands, or I'm not against that, but or whatever, having material things. The best moments on earth are those in which we meditate upon heavenly things, when we recognize and defend the truth, which is of and from the heavens, doing God's work, working for justice. Only then do we truly live. It is therefore vital to the soul that we should more often rise above the earth and mount to heaven, where alone is our true life, our true country, which shall have no end. God made us, and we will never find our rest except in Him. He gives us rest. I'm not saying to work, work, work and never have a break, but the best break is a liturgy. The best break up at the end of the day that transcends all other breaks is prayer, living the life of the church. There's many quotes from the scriptures. This one I like. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up from the desolate pit, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Countless Christians through the ages have had this experience. We're feeling down, midlife crisis even. We find meaning. He puts a song in our heart. I think this is ultimately the best answer, the best prevention of burnout. A relationship with Christ. It might sound like rhetoric, but it's not. I've got a few quotes on priests, and I'm sorry about that. I can't help it, I'm a priest, you know. But I do believe the same concepts apply to anyone who is serving the sick, the marginated, anyone who's serving other people. I think these concepts apply. A priest, a social worker, a nurse, a psychologist, a doctor needs to be able to pray about everything from his own experience. He needs to experience in himself the power of faith, the sweetness of prayer, the forgiveness of sins, and the consolations of grace. And also to experience unsuccessful prayer and spiritual afflictions, so that in his prayer to God for the faithful he can say, give to them the same blessings they have given to my unworthy self. If we have had experiences of prayer, if we've experienced the liturgy, the peace that comes after confession, this gives us strength. You ought to live in a state of constant watchfulness over yourself and over the souls of your spiritual children, and the people we are called upon to serve in the hospitals, in our clinics, entrusted to your care. They've been given to us. We can find Christ in them. You must, without ceasing, praise and thank the Lord. You must always be striving after holiness, with fasting and abstinence, with humility of mind, obedience and patience. God grant that it may be so. We can only progress spiritually, then we'll love our work, because it's the calling of the gospel to serve. Oh, okay. Talk too much. Our Archbishop, the aim is to serve our fellow human beings by going beyond ourselves, which means that we are invited to move from Pharisaism to an authentic Christian Orthodox ethos, for pietism to a sacrificial and self-emptying love. It's a problem if our work is just a job that we use to pay off our mortgage. He's saying to move past this legalism and so on, and for our service to be one of self-emptying love and sacrificial service. Then we'll enjoy it. Maybe this one, just to finish off. The life of a clergyman and those who are in the serving professions must highlight the other side of life, the beauty which governs the person of God, which gives him the privilege to see everything as beauty with a sense of joy and exaltation. St. Macarius of each characteristically notes, when the soul achieves perfection of spirit, having cleansed itself from all passions, having been united with the comfort of the Spirit through an ineffable communion, having itself become Spirit, and mingled with the Spirit, it becomes full of light, beholding all things full of Spirit, joy, peace, exaltation, love, compassion, goodness, and kindness. In other words, the secret, I think, deep down, to continue to enjoy our work is to fight the passions and to nurture the faith. Like I said before, not neglecting reading, the liturgical life and the sacramental life, belonging to a Bible study group, whatever it takes to nurture the faith. God bless you.
Our next speaker is Associate Professor Gregory Katsoulotos, Consultant Physician in Respiratory Medicine and Sleep Disorders, Clinical Associate Professor, School of University of Notre Dame, Visiting Fellow in the School of Life Sciences at the University of Technology, Sydney, and above all, a very good friend and a good mentor, and someone that I owe a lot. So Professor Gregory Katsoulotos is going to give us a medical perspective of the basics of what we need to do to be looking after ourselves in our daily message, the daily ministry. The talk is titled, Maintaining Good Physical Health, Why and What?
So let's get into it. Introduction. I want to start something that doctors wouldn't speak about, and Father Garsimore knows where this is. This is Vatopedi Monastery, and it's from a talk I heard recently of Elder Frem, saying that one day 10 doctors turned up at the monastery and expected to hear some wise words from him. And instead of saying anything, he said, I want you to tell me something first. Why do patients come and see you? And the doctors sort of said, well, they want to be healthy. And he said, no. That's not correct. And he sat there for 2 or 3 minutes in silence, and the doctors were scratching their heads. What's he talking about? And he said to them finally, they don't want to die. They want to live forever. And the doctors slowly started nodding their heads, going, you don't know, you're right. And by saying this, he was trying to tell the doctors that they had a very high ministry. They were not there just to heal the disease, but to point people to eternity. And when you look at that kind of mission, we have big shoes to fill, and we do need our health to do it. He also tells a story of the late Girunda Yosef, who was at the same monastery, who spoke to one of the monks who was also a doctor, and he saw him going around helping the elderly monks medically, but also encouraging them. And he said to him, from what you do in practicing your art and encouraging the elderly thayasis, you'll be sanctified. And they're very encouraging words to hear, that we're not here just to cure, help somebody with emphysema or somebody with some depression. that we can do a lot more for people when they walk out the door. So let's talk about a quick outline of why, and I'm going to go through the top 10 tips and some final remarks. So when I told a colleague about this idea during the week, his Greek background, he couldn't see any point in ministers and doctors meeting or health professionals. He thought they were diametrically opposed. How is it possible? But to me, they are, as one priest said to me many years ago, a doctor is the other side of the coin of a priest. A doctor can go places where a priest cannot go, and a health professional will treat everyone regardless of their race, of their beliefs or lack of beliefs. And as Father Dimitri said, we'll see Christ in every single person. So why look after our bodily health? Well, we need our bodies and our health to be able to do our work. Even the greatest saints, when they got ill in the end, had to close the doors and not see people. So we need our health to continue our work in the best way possible. So today's advice is general advice. This is the disclaimer slide. I'm not claiming to be someone who does it all right myself. Okay, I'm probably not the last, but it's for me as well. And it's tailored to your individual situation. You need a GP to oversee this kind of thing, just like you need a spiritual father. Same thing with the GP, to assess our symptoms and our risk factors. So it's general advice today. When you look what the top killers are, today we're not talking about what's going to kill us, but what maybe we're going to live with and suffer with. But you're looking at men and women, it's common, there's overlap, whether it's coronary heart disease, number 1 in men. And I've got to say, His Eminence is not here today, but when I first met His Eminence in his office, out of love, I gave him some very blunt advice. I said, Your Eminence, you've got to watch your weight, because a lot of our priests are overweight. It's not just the priests, a lot of the doctors. And coronary heart disease is a big killer here. Dementia, lung cancer, cerebrovascular disease, and COPD or emphysema. And it's not too far different in women. So we need to think about, they're the things, number 1, that we screen for if we're going to do cancer screening. Let's go through the top 10 tips. Cancer screening. Well, why is it important? Because it's a top killer. And it's also causal morbidity. You may live with it but suffer with it down the track. So general rules about cancer screening. We know when we heard, I just hit 50 last year, you get the wonderful mail from the government, go and do your test. So bowel cancer screening, but if you've got symptoms or a family history, you go earlier for a screen. Easy to do, endoscopy. Lung cancer, especially if you have symptoms or risk factors, particularly smoking, screening is appropriate, and the federal government is about to bring in national screening for lung cancer, CT screening. Prostate in men or breast in women, particularly earlier if there are risk factors, and skin checks. I see a dermatologist every 12 months for an annual skin check, and I make it my rule to do that. And minimise our risk factors, so smoking of all forms should be avoided and reducing alcohol consumption. We know that in the era that I grew up, we had Norm, Life Be In It, that character, the overweight character from the TV. But maintaining a healthy weight is a big issue as we get older, and a lot of my patients, especially males, when they get married, they put on 15 kilos over 10 years, then they come back with their sleep apnea and other comorbidities. So a sedentary lifestyle is something a lot of us have to cope with. Often indoors, sitting at a desk and gaining kilos, and it is a silent killer. Our diet may not be adequate, as we'll hear later. There may be medical conditions that contribute, or medications as well. So weight is something we need to watch, literally, as the years click by. And my older Greek patients tell me, don't get old, you get bigger and you've got arthritis and you can't move. Tip 3, adequate vitamin D. And I think, especially for our ministers, because we're often covered up completely, there's very little skin exposure, but also us in offices, we don't go outdoors. We've got the safe message from the skin, don't get skin cancer. And it's amazing when you think of what the symptoms of vitamin D deficiency are. They're very general, but even there are links with immunity. So simple things like getting some sunshine or some vitamin D replacement can go a long way. And if in doubt, check your vitamin D level on your basic bloods. Something that I'm very passionate about, I'm in the National Asthma Council, is the management of asthma. We've got 10% of the Australian population with asthma, so there's about 10% of this population are likely to be asthmatic. And yet asthma is so poorly managed in our country. People are often, taking their relievers, their Ventolins, and no preventers. It's horrific. and one person still dies every day in Australia because of asthma, because it's usually poorly managed. Sadly, these things are over the counter, and you prevent it, you've got to see a doctor and get it. It's the wrong way around. We need to get the message out that preventer is what's needed and the reliever is occasional. Have an asthma plan. We're great in kids, but we adults do not have asthma plans. You know, we have to see a doctor when we get sick. It should not be that way. Quit smoking, and there's many ways you can smoke these days, from cigarettes to vaping, which is very topical, or even the argument. You know, it doesn't matter, it's smoke. All forms of smoking is harmful. So that's a general principle. Only oxygen in our lungs. Obstructive sleep apnea, no, Jim will be getting excited now. You know, why is it important? Because it may not kill us, but it will certainly add to a poor quality of life. You know, moodiness, poor function, daytime sleepiness. So there are various ways you can get a sleep test done, from the traditional hospital test to the home sleep test, or even now there's a new wireless device which you can now stick to your chin, which will use AI and give you a result within 24 hours. So it's very easy to do a sleep study these days. Heart health. So, you know, knowing the symptoms of heart disease is important to recognise, especially as we get older. And if we are getting symptoms, please get checked out and be aware of risk factors. And sleep apnea can be associated with the onset of heart disease. So particularly if somebody has severe sleep apnea, I tell them all, go and have a heart check. I don't care if you have symptoms or not. And there have been people detected, you know, with heart disease with no symptoms. I'm a bit worried that Father George's throat clearing might actually be silent reflux. So it's important that reflux is not going to kill us, but you know, it can cause a lot of problems, you know, the cough and lots of antibiotics. So it can be overt, obvious, you know, burning and all that's easy. But the people that get the hoarse voice, the irritating cough, the throat clearing, and I hear it in church, sometimes I wish they could come and see me. The choking at night, you know, the discomfort in the chest, it may be very subtle, and they're getting antibiotics and not getting better, it's reflux. So, you know, be aware of reflux as a cause of suffering in our daily life, and it doesn't have to be that way. Sleep quality. We all need to sleep properly, enough hours and of good quality. And there's various tips you can use for good quality, but also if you're an overthinker, and some of us just think more, we take our problems to bed, a sleep psychologist can be of assistance there. And finally, as Father Dimitri alluded to, beware burnout. There are symptoms, and my patients pre-pandemic used to say to me, "Doctor, when's your next trip?" I thought, why do I always go overseas? And it's because come August, I'm usually quite burnt out, getting cranky with people, and they're my flags that I need to take a break, that I'm losing my patience and blaming people for being sick, which it should not be that way. So if we're getting any of these symptoms, we need to attend to ourselves and show some real self-care. I know I shouldn't let it get to that point, but I'd like to say sunshine, silence and social, and Pater Dimitri would say attend to your spiritual life also as well. The traps we all can fall into is we are too busy looking after others and we do not look after ourselves, and that's really tragic. Treating ourselves, especially for the medical professionals, you know, or the family members asking us for scripts, or treating ourselves and doing our own tests. I've been guilty of doing the same. You know, you dread an abnormal result. Being too busy to care for yourself. It's always an excuse, I have no time. And becoming a sedentary person are real risks. So the final remarks is we all need a GP. We all need someone to turn to for medical advice. Well, I saw a GP years ago and he said to me, "So what do you want?" I said, no, I'm the patient and you're the doctor. You tell me what I need. We need to do an annual checkup, I think at least, or earlier if we've got symptoms with our GP. It involves some humility, I think, for a doctor to go to another doctor and say, "Hey, you're in charge, you're the boss." Just like I'd imagine it would take one priest to go to another for advice. We have to make that time for our own health. So for me, I now do not see patients on a Friday. I've given my parking spot away to my secretary, so I physically cannot go to the office anymore. So I have to lock myself out because I'm so hooked on it. And I hope this network can become that place where we can all support one another in various ways. And finally, we need to look after our whole self. And I'm going to quote, this literally popped up on my phone yesterday. I thought it must be a sign, I've got to say it. But St. Nectarios spoke at the opening of a fitness club or a gymnasium on the island of Evia in August 1893. It was published 1 year later. And he spoke about exercise, or ascesis, is probably the correct word. And he says, this is the quote, if a man is to be happy, if he is to act in a way worthy of his calling, he needs to be healthy on both fronts. Since without being both in good condition, he is unable to be happy and cannot be fit to perform the work of his calling. He's talking about being healthy in body and in soul. And he talks of the happiness that comes from being well on the two parts of the self. And the training and exercise of the ascesis of both body and soul are inborn duties set upon a man by both his very nature and his calling. And he talks about how, it's a sign of civilized society that you actually exercise. It's more going back to the ancient Greeks. But he cautions against extremes. He talks about moderate exercise. I don't even do mild exercise. But everything in moderation and nothing in excess. So I'm going to finish there. This is the man I dedicated my thesis to. He was called Father Valentine Wojna-Jesenecki. He became a widower. He then becomes a bishop and a martyr in the Russian Orthodox Church, and he is now St. Luke Wojna-Jesenecki. The photo there on the left, I, through Google, found his great-granddaughter Tatiana, and she said to me, what are you doing in Australia? But she emailed me that photograph from the album of St. Luke and his two sons. So an example of somebody who combined medicine and the spiritual world in such an amazing way. Thank you.
Our next speaker, very delighted to invite her to speak, is Kali Kitas. She's a parishioner of mine, and I was doing a Desmus, and we were just finalising the program, and we're having a chat as to her work. And I go, you must speak at our talk that is coming up. Kali is a graduate of All Saints Belmore. She lives in the Burwood area. She has a lot of experience in weight loss, also in anorexia nervosa, and I think it was flagged by Greg especially the importance of nutrition. And so I'd like to invite Kali to have a chat to us about nutrition. Her talk is called Maintaining Nutrition in Our Busy Ministry.
I'm a bit nervous as well. But I want to thank Father George and Presbytera Kathy for organising such an amazing event, because I think it's important to incorporate things like this, because I think life does get by, but we seem to forget about our health when things get busy. But our health does pay the price, and then you don't become the best person, and especially if you're someone of service. You start to not be yourself and you feel burnt out. So I think it's really important that we're doing this. So thank you so much for creating something really amazing. I just wanted to, I suppose, to share a little bit about me. So I've got a bachelor's degree in science, majoring in nutrition. I do work with eating disorders, mainly binge eating disorder and disordered eating. And then obviously I do work with weight loss, emotional eating, stress eating, and anyone who just wants to improve their overall eating habits and overall health. But my approach to nutrition isn't you've got to follow this diet and this place only, also this diet only. It's very practical. It's very practical, very realistic, and it needs to be sustainable, because there's no point in doing something that you're just going to do for like a week and then you forget about it, and then you're falling back to old eating habits again. So I think it's really important to keep it nice and practical and just very realistic for your day-to-day life. And also, I'm a big fan of mindful eating practices, intuitive eating, and I'm also a big fan of CBT practices for behavioural change, because a lot of people know about calories and proteins and all that sort of thing, but I don't think that's the problem in this day and age. I think what needs to be changed is the behavioural side of things. So this what brings me to the next slide, which is I don't want to focus too much on calories and proteins and all that. It's more about what's preventing people from making those types of changes. So time constraints, so if you're working really long hours, and then you've got family and things like that, your healthful nutrition becomes all about quick and convenience, and that's not going to be the greatest for you. Social pressures, so if you're always eating out, if you're at functions and all those sorts of things, that can be quite a big one. Stress and emotional eating, so if you've got a really high pressure job, stress and emotional eating is quite a big coping mechanism. Also decision fatigue, so if you're feeling fatigued, burnt out, run down, your decision making is not going to be the greatest, so you perfectionism, so everything has to be this way or highway. And when it comes to nutrition, nutrition is not black and white. Context really does matter. So trying to be perfect with your food is not realistic. So that can be a big barrier to change. A lack of structure and routine. So if you don't have a morning routine or a nighttime routine or no routine at all, you just sort of wake up and just ruin the day. That lack of structure can fall apart later on. Too much information. There's a lot of information out there with nutrition, and I think there's a lot of misinformation more than actual proper nutritional information. So that can be quite confusing for people. Following restrictive diets as well. If you're always following weight loss programs, they have a very restricted way of eating, which is why a lot of people start their diet for 1 week and then fall off the wagon the week after, sort of have that yo-yo effect. And also, lastly, just making too many changes all at once. You're not meant to fix everything all at once. Just if there's a few problems with your eating habits, just try and focus on one thing, get good at that, make sure that that's what becomes what feels second nature for you, and then move on to the next thing that you want to work on. You don't want to focus on too many things all at once. But I also just want to say, when it comes to nutrition, it's not just your macros and your calories. It's also food influences your digestion, how your mood feels, your energy, your sleep, but also how you feel mentally, emotionally, and physically. Food is not just about satisfying hunger. It's also a big part of our culture, our connection, how we connect with people, and being Greeks, food is a big part of our culture as well. And also, it's important to learn to build the skills on how to make food decisions that are going to benefit you, instead of just trying to follow like a plan, like a meal plan, or a specific structure of calories, or whatever it is that it might be. I think it's important to build that skill within yourself to be able to make those decisions. So when the tough times do come, you're able to make the best decisions that you can when it comes to food that's actually going to support you. So I know I'm a bit tight for time, and I was trying to figure out what can I put into this slide that's going to cover everything. There's so much to cover with nutrition, but I suppose when it comes to a balanced plate, we don't want to just have no carbs and no fats and just focus on proteins and salads. It's really important to have a balanced plate that has all your proteins, your carbs, and your fats as well. And I think a lot of people know all about proteins, but I think there's a bit of confusion when it comes to carbs and fats. Like, carbs and fats aren't the bad guys, especially when it comes to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are really good for your energy, supports with your digestive health, but it's also important to know the types of carbs that you're having. So complex carbs like your whole grains, legumes, oats, rice, sweet potatoes, all those types of carbs are going to be really beneficial for you, as well as fruits and vegetables. So we actually want to include those in there, but we also want to have a balance of simple carbohydrates as well, and that does include a bit of chocolate, a bit of glucose or something like that, because we want to have a nice balance between it all. We don't want to say, I'm not going to say don't ever have sugar or try to avoid sugar at all costs, because I think that's really silly and it's really not practical either. So we just got to find that nice middle ground between it all. And also fats aren't the bad guys. I think it's just knowing the difference between the types of fats that you're having. So we want to have more of your unsaturated fats, so from your nuts, seeds, olive oil, and things like that, avocados, things like that. And obviously we want to try and reduce the types of saturated fats that you're having. So it's not to say that you can't have it. We want to have about 5% of that in our nutritional plan, but we do want to try and minimize trans fats, so that's where we find stuff. But again, we're not saying not to have it, but we just want to find that nice balance. So when it comes to putting a plate together for like a meal or like a snack, we want to have like your protein, your carbs, and your fats. So I'm not a big fan of doing calorie counting and things like that. I'm more of using my hands on portion guide. So obviously everyone's going to be different with their age, their height, their level of activity, all that sort of thing. But you sort of get a feel as to whether you've eaten enough or not enough during the day. So if you're really busy, you're going to be skipping a lot of meals, not eating enough, and then later on you're overeating because you haven't had enough food throughout the day. But a really quick easy tip is just to follow your hand when it comes to portions. So obviously it's going to be different, as I said, for men and women. But we want to have 1 to 2 pounds sizes of protein-dense foods when it comes to protein. And protein, as I said, can be whatever protein you want, whether it's chicken, beef, tofu, fish, eggs, whatever it is that you might enjoy and something that you find, something that you look forward to. There's nothing worse than trying food or following a diet that you don't really enjoy just so you can lose weight or whatever it is that it might be. So you want to pick the vegetables that you like, or the different types of salads that you like. And then you want to have 1 to 2 cups handful of carbohydrates, and the amount of carbohydrates that you have is going to be dependent, as I said, your energy levels, all those types of things. But you want to have a variety of those types of carbs. And then when it comes to fat, 1 to 2 grams size of whether it's olive oil, peanut butter, avocados, or whatever it is that it might be. So it's really nice to have the hand guide. It just keeps things nice and practical. So I try to pinpoint the top 3 problems or challenges that people face when it comes to nutrition. So time constraints are a really big one, and I always say it's really important to make time of your downtime. So when it comes to meal prepping or meal planning, you don't have to, just so that you don't have to do the shopping and then do the cooking all in one day and spend hours and hours in the kitchen. Just keep it really simple. Just pick one day where you do the shopping, and another day where you do the meal prepping, and just keep your food choices really simple so you can utilize ready-made salads, frozen vegetables, different types of cuts of protein that are going to be really easy to cook, like chicken tenderloins or even some black yard that don't take long to cook. And if you're really burnt out, or got lots of clients who are burnt out, utilizing ready-made meals can be just something that can just take the pressure off, but at least you're having something that's going to be there for you instead of always relying on fast food and things like that. So make the use of that downtime, and also you want to streamline it too and have a bit of structure. So Sunday might be the meal prepping day, but then Saturday morning might be your shopping day. So at least you have that structure and then you just do that routinely. And then you also want to make sure that you've got some grab-and-go snacks. So especially if you're in between patients or just in between work and you don't have, the worst thing that I found with clients is that they don't eat for a very long period of time, and then they end up binge eating or overeating later on, and then they just undo everything that they've done. They don't feel good, they feel like they're about to pass out, they're so hungry. So it's really important just to have grab-and-go snacks. So at least you can have something in between that can prevent from that too much hunger for later on. So things like wraps, jerky, yogurt, nuts, fruits, things like that are going to be really quick and easy that you can keep wherever it is that you work, if you've got a fridge in the car, things like that. And obviously, there's going to be times where you are going to be eating out, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with eating out. I suppose it's just trying to make the best choices that you can when you are eating out. So opting for, instead of getting fried stuff, you're getting things that are going to be getting good protein. And cafes now and even restaurants have so many options now for making healthier choices. But just keeping it really practical too. So if you're eating out, let's just say 15 times a week, you want to be like, okay, well, I am eating out quite a lot, but if I can make better choices, let's just say 7 out of 15, at least that's half the time we're actually making better choices. And even if that means that you're going to Nando's or Corlo's, Starbucks, and getting a wrap or a sandwich, it's going to be a far better option than always just relying on fast food or fried food all the time. So just making real choices like that. I was taking this one through. And I think we've all experienced the Yara situation. But I think social pressures is a big one. So just maintain a regular schedule of eating. So we want to try and aim to eat every 3 to 4 hours. That's going to prevent from overeating later on. And if you are dining out at other people's home, that's fine. Whatever the option that they have there, just eat slow. Pause between bites, so then you can build that skill to learn when you are having that satiety, fullness signals for you. I'm just going to really just pace it through because I don't have a bit out of time. But when it comes to stress and emotional eating, you want to understand what your behaviours and patterns are, what are your cues and your rewards, why do we do what we do, and obviously it's when you're stressing on the pump, that food's going to be a really good coping mechanism. So you want to have just being really mindful around the choices that you're making, but also how food makes you feel. So this is where mindful eating practices come into play. So there's a lot of mindful eating practices that you can do, but I just can't share with you right now. But I'll just finish it off here. But hopefully this was helpful for you, and obviously if you've got any questions about anything or want me to go deeper into anything else, just feel free to reach out to me. outside or anytime I'm always happy to help. So, yeah, thank you.
So our final speaker is social worker Anastasia Chrysos. She's been in that role as social worker in the health sector for 17 years or thereabouts. She's currently in a management position, and she's going to talk about how do we make our workloads sustainable. So I think it's an impossible task. I feel it's an impossible task. I don't know how other people feel about their workload and how we can be sustainable. I'm all ears waiting to hear Anastasia. We're very keen to hear your talk.
Very similar to the other speakers. We're very excited and very happy for the pastoral healthcare ministry sector to be up and running from this year onwards. So, how do we make our workload sustainable? The positions that we hold are often referred to as life of service in clergy, but also in healthcare roles. And whilst we hold this motto of being called to serve, it can at times bring a certain weight or heaviness to our life. And what our ultimate goal is achieving a healthy workspace. And what a wonderful joy for being able to be involved in the church ministry to maintain a healthy workspace in that sense. It's common in our health work practices the experience of exhaustion. Father Dimitri touched on those symptoms, and I'll be going into them in a little bit more detail. Things like the inability to concentrate, negative outlook, self-doubt, frequent mood changes, social isolation. And there's sometimes some very serious workplace hindrances that lurk in today's fast-paced 21st century, and they can lead to burnout. Pastoral care is not immune to this. We all know that perseverance in the ministry or the helping professions requires the stamina of a marathon, and this is not a sprint mindset. And as leaders in our own respective fields and as Orthodox Christians, to last as a leader is to develop systems and habits that ensure we sustain ourselves and therefore our leadership influence for a long time. What we're looking for to sustain ourselves are similar to the scenario of the emergency scenario of aircraft and going on a plane. When we go through those emergency procedures, it's the air hostesses. I've been on a plane for a while, but as I remember, we place the oxygen mask on ourselves before we place this on others, and I'm very joyful to hear that that's something that we've made reference to already today. Just a little bit about what is burnout. Burnout was first defined by Herbert Freudenberger in the 70s, and he defined it as a state of mental and physical exhaustion caused by one's professional life. He gave 3 components on what burnout encompasses, and that is the emotional exhaustion. So that's the fatigue that comes from caring for too much for too long. Depersonalization, so the depletion of empathy, of caring and compassion. And the decreased sense of accomplishment, that feeling that, oh, here we go again, who am I going to help? How's that going to be any help to that person? And will it make any difference? Not knowing exactly what the spread is in the room, I suppose just 2 elements or offshoots of burnout are that element of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. These are things that we see very often and commonly in the emergency and acute trauma hospital setting. Compassion fatigue being the emotional residue or strain from the exposure of working with those suffering from the consequences of traumatic events. And vicarious trauma being that the common and cumulative detrimental effect with working with and being repeatedly exposed to traumatic information. And I can only imagine that that is also very prevalent in our pastoral ministry as well. If we were playing Burnout Bingo, Father Dimitri, you've predicted the winner so far in naming all the signs and symptoms, but seeing that there are quite a few, and I've separated them on this slide as physical, emotional, feelings and behaviours. Some of them that we've spoken about, you can see here on the board: emotional, having that distress, nervousness, intrusive thoughts, which are those negative type thoughts, resentment, feeling stuck, increased agitation, as we mentioned before, increased conflicts, and the big one here is being disconnected. We've looked a little bit about what burnout is, somewhere we don't really want to be, and a territory that we want to avoid, but sometimes we might find ourselves there. So let's now pivot to strategies to sustain ourselves in professional vocation. Boundaries are really important because they help us maintain the balance needed in order to function effectively in all aspects of one's life. Having the right balance helps to nurture wellness, and being in a state of wellness allows us to provide care to others, which is what Dr. Greg had mentioned. Some of these strategies to maintain boundaries include prioritising our workload and scheduling. So what can wait, what is fixed, and what time is preserved for family or self. And making sure that the time that we schedule for family or self is prioritised and held in the same value as that of our patients or clients that we review. Time is a commodity that can't be expanded, and when we manage our time better, we must learn to manage ourselves better. When we establish these boundaries for our personal lives, this facilitates our ability to maintain the balance that we need in order to continue to function well. So we think about, I've mentioned here, beware the drain of counselling. If we're not, I happen to have the joy of being trained in counselling and a degree in that, but some of us have, that as part of one of the roles that we do in our lives. So being able to know when to refer on, being able to keep a limit of time, and being brief. Being very clear from the onset how much time you have to spend with that individual, but speaking with them with eye contact, with empathy, feeling them for that moment, but then knowing that we can't spend that immense time with them. So being clear about that from the onset. Kiria Maria, what you're telling me is very good. I value the fact that you've told me, and thank you for telling me your story. I'm not the specialist that can support you in this, but I know who can, and let me help you to find the right person that you can get that support from. Managing those expectations, being in the roles in the community, whether we're in healthcare or in pastoral care, as I can only imagine, we're in the public eye. And so some people have a lot of expectations from us, and it's very challenging to manage all of that. So not only do we have the expectations that are external, we have expectations of our own, and our families also, and our children, they also have expectations too. So being able to manage them means having off a day a week, being open and honest about what you can achieve, having some accountability of yourself and accountability of others, and setting those realistic goals. Being mindful of meeting the needs of your parish or healthcare setting versus family. I think I've repeated that a few times, so being clear, as I said. Having a few topics that we might say safe topics. In healthcare, we talk a lot about the animals, like budgerigar, the dog, the cat. Tell me about that person, or something that you can share of yourself. And being able to know what topics are off limits. Not many people enjoy saying no to people, and because we all like to be liked, and doing someone a favour helps us feel likeable. We may even want to impress a certain individual, and that's all very understandable. But the reality is that there are things that only we can do, things that we should do, things that others can do, and things that others should do. So being able to consider your ability levels and your responsibilities, using this as a guide to determine your answer as to what you say no to. The research for burnout and what counteracts burnout most recently is definitely not massages and self-care and holidays. The research is actually preventing isolation and increasing connectedness. We're so fortunate and blessed in our church. We know that prayer is the main form of connection with Christ. But the main thing around preventing burnout and ensuring sustainability is staying connected. So some of the practical elements here is being connected with community, knowing your parish, knowing who's the local person, the local psychologist, GP, doctor, healthcare professional, who's the local business, who's the professional groups there, and being able to refer on them and delegate when needs be. Knowing who your close-knit of friends are versus your acquaintances, what your commonalities are. So in health, there might be some professional groups, some common interest groups, etc., in which you can lean on and speak with. Self-interests, what I mean by this is the research also says that it's really good to have a hobby, something that's different from your everyday role, and something to explore that is not the same as reading, which is part of your professional line. And obviously looking towards colleagues and speaking with colleagues. As mentioned in the literature, like I said, another significant part is to maintain a strong support network. As clergy, leaders and health professionals, we're always suspected or expected to provide superhuman performance at work. And we somehow are meant to balance this with a satisfying home life and social relationships. It's really important for us to have strong networks of support to assist them. It's important for sustainability to have well-trained supervisors who are challenging how we are operating. We need accountability partners, mentors, or spiritual directors who do not let us off the hook. As I mentioned on the slide, we've got some mentors. We want to be able to take the lead in coordination. We see a gap, let's fill it. We don't have to wait for the next person. Refer on, as I mentioned before, and build your network around you. Education and training. If we're feeling like we're getting stuck, reach out, see what's different. If I don't know much about interpersonal skills, let me learn about communication. I don't know much about counselling, let me hop online. There's a mental health first aid course that I can look at and investigate and learn. And a lot of these opportunities now, we're very lucky. They're at our fingertips in our offices, in our lounge rooms, in our kitchens. Critical reflection and feedback. Obviously, we have autosyngeneration and reflection of our own to know thyself. But in the professional setting, critical reflection is very important to see whether we've acted in the best interests of the people that we serve. And obviously, if we feel that we are experiencing that element of burnout, obviously seeking that professional help. In your handouts, you will see a whole little slide of resources that I've also added. There is support online available, and I encourage you to look at those spheres wherever you find the need. Thank you.
Yes, there was something we used to joke about in medical school was an alcoholic or somebody who drank more than you. I don't drink that much, by the way. There is the risk of being desensitized to disease, and as a specialist, you tend to see the worst of the worst, like in hospitals. You don't see the mild illnesses. So you can get desensitized. I think the key is to try to put yourself in people's shoes. And when you see the family's reaction to an illness, to put yourself in their shoes so you don't sort of lose that humanity side of it. And for me, it's been, there are times I do desensitize and detach, and that's the time I need to take time out and think about what I'm doing. So I tell my patients, and I try to tell myself, listen to your body, and if you're getting those signals, then you need to act. So, but there's always that risk, I think, when you're exposed to all sorts of things that you just start to normalize it.
I agree. I agree, but the risk is that depersonalisation is one of the risk factors, and people see through that quite quickly when they meet us. And so when we're in that active service, it's important for us to acknowledge when we are feeling that depersonalisation to find a way to reconnect. Because at the end of the day, connection and connection with people and that human element is key in our roles.
I agree, it's really hard because everybody wants top level cover, for free or whatever, and it's not possible in a private setting. We know the cost of running a practice and insurances, just being realistic. I think one of the things I try to do, and I don't always achieve it, but at least to communicate with the GP. So they may not come back to see, but you can give some directions to the GP about what they can do. But it's a real challenge, because the waiting times to get into public hospitals might be 6 months or more, and some people wants help now.
I'd like to indulge 5 or 10 minutes of your time to just talk a little bit more about the network. Today is the first meeting that we've had. Some of the reasons for existing as a Pastoral Health Care Network is to bring us together, as we have done this evening, to be able to have that support one from the other, people that are members of the church in some capacity, to be able to bring it together to learn from each other. And I think that we have a lot that we can learn from each other to make our pastoral work in whichever capacity, as priest, chaplain, as doctor, as nurse, as allied health, as pharmacist, in whatever capacity to enhance the work that we do. Presbytera and I have been thinking about, the more we think about the potential scope of the network, the more overwhelming it gets. So obviously we're going to sort of prioritise. It is a journey that is just the beginning. The sky's the limit. And whilst the workers are few, Margarita, if the workers can work together, I think there's a lot more that we can achieve. And that's one of the reasons for the network existing. Now, I should say that we're having some preliminary thoughts about our next seminar, and we're looking at August, and we're looking at the topic being communication. I'd like there to be, some of the thinking about this talk is what the church fathers say about ministering to the sick, and we also think that having some basic counselling skills is going to maybe another part of that seminar. But make sure that you are on our mailing list, and you will be able to firstly contribute with your thoughts as to what will be suitable, and also to be able to hear about our next seminar. Now, in terms of the structure of the network, Presbytera and I are the national coordinators. We organised today, sort of time ran out from us. We sort of we wanted to do something before Lent started, and we're running out of time, and that affected our marketing and so forth. But just at the beginning, and as a first step, having you today, I think was fantastic and beyond our expectations. So we thank you for your participation and your presence today. Presbytera and I are going to step back because we've got to focus on the national picture in setting up groups like this all over Australia, to be speaking to your graces, the bishops, and they've been extremely encouraging, and to work with them to identify the executives of each of the Archdiocesan Council, the 7 of them in Australia, to be able to set, to have a couple of delegates on the national executive, and then working within each of the Archdiocesan Council to do similar things to what we do today. At the national level, we could do other things as well. We could have international speakers via Zoom talks. They could be Australia-wide. Wouldn't it be great to have, I don't know, Metropolitan Nikolaos of Mesogia to give a talk, or Vasilios Dermos from Greece, or Philip Mamalakis from the United States, or other esteemed speakers that can talk about sort of give their perspective, and to organise Zoom talks like that, international speakers. And that can be pan-Australian. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to be organising, conferences, retreats, whatever the case is. Again, the sky's the limit. So at the Sydney Archdiocese district level, we've been working together with the Protosingulos, Father Christophoros, and we've identified the state executives, or the Sydney executives that will be on the national executive. And those two are Father Edward, who is the Roman microphone person. Father Edward is the priest of the Ukrainian Church in Newcastle, and he's a dentist as well. And also Presbytero Metaxia Dubelekis, as clinical psychologist, two very able, very capable people that will be the state, if you like, the Sydney Archdiocese district representatives on the national executive. We'll be more than happy to pass on the organisation of the future of the seminar. But it's a journey that we'd like all of you to be part of, or as many of you, depending on the time that you have and the ability to be able to provide to the growing network that is just starting. And you may be able to support the network and to be part of the network in whichever way you can. And Presbytero has organised the feedback forms, and part of the feedback forms is to ask you in what way you can be involved. And we hope the more people that can be involved, the more resource we have at the disposal to make this a greater endeavour. So we're looking to hear from whoever can, and in whichever capacity you can, to be able to assist in the network that is just sprouting, if you like. Of course, we've got the synaxes of the Doctor Saints, which we may be able to do something more about. Then we need to be looking at things such as IT support, website. With Presbytero, we're working on a constitution for the Pastoral Health Care Network. Once we have a constitution, we can have a bank account. Once we have all those things, we can apply for grants. The sky's the limit. So we've been thinking about it a fair bit, and we are inviting you to join our journey. The Sydney Archdiocese District Committee, I think it'd be nice to have not just Father Edward and Presbytero, it'd be nice to have 5 people or so to be able to be organising events such as this, and then to utilise more people as needed.